Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the All Saints podcast. I have the distinct pleasure today of being able to talk with another minister in the CREC, a man who's been around in the denomination for a number of years, certainly longer than I've been serving in the denomination. This is Pastor Virgil Hurt of Providence Church in Lynchburg, Virginia. Pastor Hurt, it is a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to talk with you.
Well, my aim here in talking with you is, well, I've got several aims. First, it's just great for us as a congregation here at All Saints to get a little bit more of a feel for what life is like in other churches in the denomination. So I'd love to ask you about that in a few minutes' time. Of course, we are in a denomination and we have a number of new members here at All Saints who have come from other church backgrounds, Baptist church backgrounds or other church backgrounds. So they might not even know what kind of a denomination the CREC is. And you are in a unique position, as I'll explain, or maybe get you to explain in a few minutes, to give us some thoughts on that. But before we get into that, I wonder if you could just tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us about your background, how you came to Christ, your family, and so we get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I was raised in a non-Christian family. My one of 5 children, not a good home life at all. My oldest sister, when she was in high school, became a Christian, and she doesn't even remember the exact details of how that came to pass. But through her, then the rest of us siblings heard the gospel. I went to the church with her as a child and was saved. And I think I went to several Keith Green concerts back in the day. Might have even answered an altar call at a Keith Green concert.
Wow, I remember Keith Green tapes. Yeah. My mum had those lying around when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, so that was the sort of the beginning of the I don't know what you call it, the contemporary Christian music or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, my sister moved away, and then I had kind of my rebellious days were in junior high school. And then in high school, I settled down to being a serious Christian. And then my 2 brothers became Christians somewhere in there, as well as my younger sister. And so all of us have been serving the Lord these, 40 some odd years.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. So your big sister has a lot to answer for then.
Yeah.
That's great. And so you're now pastor of Providence Church in Lynchburg. Tell us a little bit about the church there and what life is like and so on.
Yeah, well, I came here in 2000. I was an elder out at Christ Church in Doug Wilson's church. Had been a deacon there, an elder, was studying for ministry. His brother lived here in Lynchburg, Virginia. We didn't know anything about the East, or this is the East as well as the South. We didn't know anything about either place. We thought we'd probably end up in Boise, Idaho, or something. My wife and I grew up in southern Idaho, and through a series of circumstances, trials, really a bunch of trials, the Lord prepared us to be ready to move away from there. We thought we'd be there forever, and then it came a time after a couple of real big difficulties where we really wanted to kind of move and start over. And it was just at that time that Doug's brother was becoming reformed in his theology, and I was studying for the ministry, and Doug Wilson asked me to come out here and plant a church. That's what we did. That was in 2000. There were no other members. It was us, Doug's brother, and one other family.
You were serious, so 3 families.
3 families, and I was full-time. I was managing Kinko's Copy Centers at the time, so I was managing full-time busy job in a actually different town, commuting about an hour away, and did that for a while, and then was able to go full-time at pastoring. And now I've been here 23 years. Well, 22 years, right about now, 22 years, and the church is doing really well, and we've been here. It's home now. Raised our kids, and then our kids grew up and moved away, but but we've been here a long time.
And it's interesting to talk about that background because the CREC has been wonderfully growing in recent years to the extent that we now have I guess a reasonable number of churches of a medium size, 100 and something plus, and it's easy to forget that many or all of those churches, almost all of them, began as very small groups of people, half a dozen families in a front room somewhere and so on. What kind of perspective does that history give you on church life, do you think, as a pastor?
Well, I think all different perspectives. I referenced recently an article that I sent out to our denomination, the Tim Keller article, actually on church growth and size. Yeah. And, you kind of go through all these phases. And when you plant a church and it's just you and a few other people, it's really kind of a house church as much as anything. Everything is around the pastor. And then as the church grows a little bit, still the pastor is sort of responsible for everything. And then as you add deacons and elders, and there just gets to be too many people and too much work for one man. And so you begin to spread that work out. And that's a really good thing, because now you have other men who are becoming capable at leadership and pastoring. For instance, when I moved here, the first few people that joined our church were Liberty students. They were several of them. I did their weddings. It was even before they were married, a bunch of them, and they just kind of were going to a Bible study that Gordon Wilson was doing. Yeah. They ended up coming to the church. Those guys are all of our elders and deacons now. Now they're 40 years old. They're 41, 42 years old. They've been in our church for 20 years. They have grown children who are now going off to Liberty University and New St. Andrews College, and they're, leaders. And so we're able to develop them. And now the church, I still have a vital role, but it's not dependent upon me. I could die. I almost did die a few years ago. And the church would just sort of go merrily on. They'd probably be sad for a few days, but it would all just fine.
I think we might be sad for a bit longer than that. But you raised that issue, and I asked you before we began talking, just on the recording here, if we could talk about this. But you just said, quote, "I almost died a few years ago," or words to that effect. Now, do you want to talk? Would you mind talking a little bit about that? Because that's really just a wonderful story of God's grace, right?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. What year did you come over here, Steve?
So I came over here in late 2020. I'd been pastoring in the UK in a church that was closely associated with the CREC since 2009. So
you may even have heard about it then. I know you weren't here, but so many of our people who were in the CREC knew about this situation because so many people were praying for me, and people all around the world with our churches all around the world. But I've been a healthy person all of my life. I've been an exerciser, lifting weights and running, and of my brothers, I was the healthiest probably of the three. And at 53 years old, I had a massive heart attack and fell down. And I didn't just have a heart attack; I went into cardiac arrest. My heart stopped. I was, essentially dead for about 8 minutes, and my neighbor happened to be outside at just the right time. My wife was here, but she panicked and ran outside, and nothing she could do for me. And my neighbor came into the house and did CPR, on me until the ambulance was able to get here to shock my heart back to life. So that was in 2018. So we're coming up on, I guess it's been 4 years now, and I haven't really had any health problems since then, which is all quite amazing given what I went through. Generally have pretty massive heart damage and maybe even some brain damage. Maybe there's some of that, but people won't tell that to me to my face.
Yeah. Well, in my interactions with you, Pastor Hurd, I've not detected any physical or mental impairment at all. And I'd love to move on to that because you have a role in the denomination that gives you a picture of the denomination that most of the rest of us don't see. So I wonder if you talk about that, just so people know, and so that you know what I'm alluding to, that I'm sure you do. You are the presiding minister of council, which sounds like an extremely important and elevated role. So tell us what on earth that means, and in the process, tell us a bit about how the denomination works and so on and so forth.
Right. So that's probably good to do. I'll try to do a really quick kind of overview, because like you said, you have a lot of new people in your church.
Right.
And so do we, most of them coming from Baptist backgrounds, so they're not familiar with Presbyterianism even. Sure. And we're kind of a hybrid Presbyterian / kind of congregational, if you will, I think, in our polity in the sense that we're Presbyterian in form in our local churches. They have elders that rule as a session of elders. But then we do have presbyteries, that is the group of churches in a geographic region, and each of them has a presiding minister that oversees their presbytery. But the churches are still, pretty independent. But there is an oversight of the churches via presbytery, and then we have 7 presbyteries around the world, and most of them in the United States. One that's mostly in Eastern Europe, but we have churches in Japan and in South America and Canada as well. And the presiding minister of council oversees the presbyteries, if you will, and it's at council meeting is the place where you could change things like governing documents, constitutions, those kinds of things. So the council oversees that. So my role is to help oversee that, to make sure the presbyteries are doing what they're doing, that the presiding ministers know, keeping up on their churches and planning their meetings and giving some level of vision and oversight to some degree, trying to encourage us to continue to grow and be positive about what God is doing in our midst.
Yeah, well, it's not difficult to be positive right now. I mean, it's been a wonderful few years, and in the sense we've had a terrible time, along with most of the rest of the Western world and indeed the Eastern world with COVID and so on. But in various ways, by God's grace, we've seemed to have come out the other side as a denomination, looking in reasonably good shape. Do you have any thoughts about what's going on there and what position we were in or are in as a denomination to continue to serve Christ and people faithfully and well?
Well, one thing that's kind of become a mantra for us here locally, and it's certainly true of the CREC, is that COVID has been very good to us. So we're very pleased with how, not just how we've survived, in a sense, this external threat that we thought was at first was a big health threat, and then later turned out to be some level of a big government threat, and helping us figure out what's important, our priorities, and even how to deal with governments and mandates and all those kinds of things. So that's been really healthy. But our denomination, because of that, because of sort of the external threat, not just of the disease, but the threat to the church, of governments and other kinds of medical, decisions that were made that were outside of our control, really helped unify us and helped us reprioritize on gospel, worship, family life, the sorts of things, education, the sorts of things that we're sort of known for. And that also helped us internally within the CREC to be like-minded, to have a lot of peace, I think a lot more trust and encouragement internally in our denomination across the country and across the world. So it's really been a really good time for us. And one of the results of that, I think, has been the growth of the CREC. One of the things that I've seen historically is, for instance, in a local church, when elders are at odds or the session is kind of a mess because the elders are at odds with each other, even if they don't go public with that and the church doesn't know, the church suffers greatly. And the church, they know, even if they don't know. It's kind of like if mom and dad are at odds.
Right.
The kids know something's wrong in the home.
There's something in the atmosphere.
Yeah. And so our denomination has been, I think, like that to some degree. This has created a lot of unity among the leadership of the CREC, which, even talk, a little earlier, we used the word being positive. I think our men are very positive about what God is doing in our churches individually. They're growing. And denominationally, the denomination is growing. There's a lot of interest from the outside, from Baptist circles and other places. And a lot of those people are coming. In our church, I just did the numbers because I'm going to do our State of the Church sermon next month. I always do in January, and I always kind of report our new members and our growth. We added 110 members this year.
Wow.
And that's at a church that was like at 230 or so. I mean, that puts us where we must have been around 240 because we're about 350 or something like that. Well, that's a lot of growth in 1 year for a church our size. Almost all of those people came to us directly from Baptist churches.
Right.
And that's very different than what we've seen in the past 10 years. They're really excited about what's going on. They're excited about faithful preaching, worship. They're embracing covenant theology. A lot of them didn't know that much about it, but they're loving it and are excited about it. So lots of good energy right now.
And just thinking about where that growth is coming from, and that, like you said, it's a somewhat new phenomenon, although it's not been entirely unknown in the past. Do you think there are theological factors at play? Do you think this? We'd all like to believe it's the intrinsic cogency and persuasiveness of Paedo-Baptist covenant theology. But do you think there are wider cultural factors which are leading people to try and find a home in the CREC?
I do. It's not Paedo-Baptism. I think Paedo-Baptism and our worship, our baptism, our view of God's view of children, that isn't what's bringing people, but it is what keeps people.
Right. Okay.
So they come, and then they hear those things, and they see it in action, and it's so beautiful, and they love it, and then they really jump in. They're coming for a few reasons. One of them is just this big demographic move we're seeing all around the country, where people are moving from blue states to red states. And locally, they're sort of moving from churches that are going blue, if you will.
Right.
They're not really liberals or leftists, but they're soft on gospel. They're soft on the woke stuff and those kind of things. Or they're either soft or the conservatives in their church feel like they're going the wrong direction.
Yeah, there isn't such a clearly defined line in the sand being drawn. Yeah,
exactly. And then when they come to our churches, there's clarity.
Right.
And they really like that clarity. We're open to people. We're friendly. But I also think one of our persuasive place, a powerfully persuasive place that we have is we know who we are. We know what we believe.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, we're not threatened by Baptists coming to our churches, and they're, we know if they're willing to come and fellowship with us, we know where they're kind of going, what direction they're going. Yeah. So we're glad to have them here.
Exactly.
Yeah, we want them to be true to their conscience. We know we're not forcing you to be Paedo-Baptist or Paedo-Communion, but I'm amazed at how quickly people go down that path when they come to our church. And many of these people it's not that they're wishy-washy Christians and just believe whatever the pastor says. These are pretty strong, theologically astute Christians that are coming to our churches, but they see the arguments clearly and quickly, and they say, yep, we're in.
Right.
So that's pretty exciting.
And your point, it's not just the arguments that they see the actual community being lived out, right? There's a kind of community life that is the inevitable correlate of rightly ordered worship that includes children at all the right places.
Yep.
I think that's right. And it's one of those things that it's bittersweet, isn't it? When we see, back to your previous point, it's bittersweet to see formally strong conservative denominations, whether Presbyterian or Baptist churches, that are not drawing the lines as firmly and clearly as perhaps some in those contexts would like to see them drawn. I find myself torn in two directions, honestly, because on the one hand, we all realize the need to make those clear statements and to say no when no needs to be said, but all of us would rather be talking about anything else, like Christian family life and working hard in the secular workplace and living lives of godliness and faithfulness and worship and all those things. It does drive me slightly nuts to have to keep addressing this kind of secularist elephant in the room. But we've just got to do it, right? It's just we've got to define ourselves positively and against the negative background.
Yeah, and I do think when we come to our churches, those things are clear. It's not like, at least in our church, we don't spend a lot of time talking about those lines. but they're clear. So when people come, if they ask, they get a really clear answer. But it's not really the topic of our conversation.
Right.
And I think that's part of feeling comfortable in your own skin is we know what we believe. We're not going to compromise on those kinds of things. Yeah. And so because of that, we don't really have to be defending ourselves all the time.
Right, exactly. And it's neither apologizing or being bombastic. Just kind of articulate the truth and live it out and be ready to draw the lines. Yeah, no, I like that. So, listen, I'm conscious you've got a lot on, and I don't want to keep you any longer than you may have tacitly thought you were agreeing to. So, I want to ask you about two more things.
Sure.
In a moment, I want to ask you some things we can pray for you and your church and your ministry as PM of Council. But before we do that, just say a word to us briefly on this growth of the denomination issue about the international scene. You mentioned already we do have some churches overseas, and the folks here at All Saints will know about that. We pray for CREC churches overseas. We have close links with one or two of them. Is there anything you can tell us about the interest in and the growth of our denomination among believers and churches overseas?
Well, it's starting. There is interest. We see interest. We see some people finding us. A group of fellows found us in the Philippines, and I went over there in 2020 and got to meet these guys. And it's a pretty amazing group of men who are going down this reform path. I mean, they're solidly reform guys now and have a really potential big impact in the Philippines. And they're really sharp men, but they also see the stability that we have, the structure we have. And we're still a pretty young denomination, but we're way ahead of them.
Right.
And they see that and want that kind of stability. So that's a good opportunity. Of course, we have the Eastern European churches in Poland and Ukraine, and those continue to grow, and so there's some difficult work there. But recently, I get emails almost every day from people in the United States saying, "We live so and so. Are you guys going to plant a CREC church there?" Almost every day, I get an email like that,
and the answer is eventually, right?
Right. And so I usually just forward it to the presiding minister that covers that area and say, "Hey, maybe they have some context for you." Some of those have formed up into potential churches.
Right.
But now I'm starting to get some of those even from international people. So the last couple of days, I got a couple of emails from some guys in Norway that are looking to, they're Reformed. There's no Reformed works there. They found us online. They're listening to Douglas Wilson, and the Canon app has become a huge
that's becoming big, hasn't it? Yeah.
A lot of people listening to that, and our denomination has about 12,000 or 13,000 people total. And the Canon app, though, is reaching more like 50,000 people.
Right. Wow.
So that's a potential large number of people who are being trained, not just in Reformed thinking, but really kind of CREC mindedness.
Yes.
So I think that's going to open up a big thing. Anyway, back to international. That's going to continue to grow. The interest there, those are difficult relationships just to develop because
of course,
with travel, relationships, language, all those kinds of things make it really hard work, but it's worthwhile to pursue.
Absolutely. Well, hey, listen, before we go then, the final thing, some things that we can pray for you. We thank God that you're still alive and looking pretty energetic and serving faithfully for you and your family, for your church, and your work as PM of the wider denomination.
Yeah. Well, my family, there's a lot going on. So this week, what's today? Tuesday. My son, I have 6 children and 8 grandchildren, and my youngest son is getting married on Saturday.
Oh, wow. And, congratulations.
Thank you. My top 4 are all married, and then my daughter is also bringing a beau out here, so she's got a serious suitor. So we might be having, Lord willing, another wedding there in the near future as well. So we're entering into the full-blown empty nester stage in our lives. But our church is growing rapidly. The denomination is growing. There's lots of work to do. Right. And I have one more year as the presiding minister of council. Our next year's council is our 25th anniversary of the CREC.
Wow, that's exciting.
So that's going to be a really big deal, and we're going to have a really big event. And so just pray that I'm diligent in our own church and the work that we have here, and then helping to set the CREC up. I think the next presiding minister is going to be really busy, and I think in the next 3 years or 6 years, he's going to have a lots on his plate, and it's very good. So pray that I hand that off well to him, and the Lord continues to keep us unified as a denomination and uses us, far beyond our size. I think he is using us far beyond our size, and I hope that continues.
That's fantastic. Well, hey, listen, thank you very much for your time. On behalf of the congregation here, thank you for your service, and for I have some idea, having talked to our presiding minister of Presbytery, Pastor Randy Booth in Nacogdoches, I have some idea how many hours in the week it takes to do the extra work that you commit to as PM of Council, but I can't imagine the background mental drain and all the unwanted little snippets of 20 minutes here and there. So thank you for all you do. We get to see the fruit of it around us here. And of course, we're all striving to serve Christ, but we're part of something bigger than us. And it's a real blessing for me as a pastor, and I know for the congregation here, even though we might not even realize it at times. It's great for us to hear of, so that we can acknowledge these larger structures within which we've been placed by the Lord, and for which we thank him. So thank you, sir, for your time and for your ministry. The Lord bless you. And
good talking to you. The Lord blesses you and the congregation there. And hopefully I'll get down to Texas and see you all sometime.
Whenever you get down here, plees look us up. It'd be great to see you. God bless.
I can tell you're really developing a southern Texas accent there. So
me? Yeah. Yeah, the chance would be a fine thing. I don't think so. All right. All right. God bless. Bye for now.